Deadlock has a problem. From the title of this video and the thumbnail, you may be able to guess what it is. And no, that problem is not to the player base that's been dropping. I know a lot of people have been making videos about that, and even though that might be an issue, that's not the issue I want to address today. Today, I want to talk about one of the core mechanics of the game, cooldowns, and why I think that there are some issues that may need to be addressed before the game releases if we want to have a healthy game with good balance. As always, when I make these videos, I always provide the feedback directly through the proper channels before making a video about this. So don't worry, the developers are already aware of my opinion on this, and I'm just making the video to get the discussion into the community and see what everybody thinks about this and see if I'm not alone. I've already talked to some other players, of course, that also agree with me, so I know that this is not an opinion that only I hold, but I'm curious what the general community thinks, because sometimes I can be in a bit of a bubble at a high level play, and I just want to know if you guys agree at a more, standard level of skill. The problem in question is cooldown reduction. So in Deadlock, there is no mana, and so the way that abilities are balanced is purely through cooldowns, right? So for example, the way that Lash's abilities or, Dynamo's abilities, etc. are balanced is by having a cooldown that is long enough so that you can't spam the abilities, and so that the abilities aren't like super overpowered because you can just use them all the time, right? However, in this game, there are lots of ways to get cooldown reduction. If we quickly go through all the ways, you can get cooldown reduction from the golden statues. You can get cooldown reduction from the bridge buff. The casting buffs gives you 15% cooldown reduction. And you can get cooldown reduction from a bunch of different items. And on top of that, a lot of the abilities will just have minus cooldown talents on top of them, right? Some of these upgrades, for example, as you can see Bebop here, his first upgrade is minus 30-second cooldown on his ultimate. What this results in is an environment where pretty much every single hero can have, their abilities be on a way shorter cooldown than before. As opposed to other games in the genre. For example, if you compare this to Dota, and Dota cooldown reduction is generally speaking fairly hard to obtain, right? There aren't a lot of ways to obtain it, and the ways that you can obtain it are usually more expensive in proportion. For example, in this game, you can buy an item like, let's say you buy a superior cooldown, it costs 4,200 souls. In Deadlock, you'll usually get about 1,000 souls per minute, so this will take you maybe 4 minutes to farm, maybe a little bit less if you're later in the game, and it will give you 32% cooldown reduction for one ability. If you compare this in Dota you have one item that gives you cooldown reduction, which is Octarine Core, which gives you 25% cooldown reduction. However, the item is more expensive, costs a little over 5,000 gold, and in Dota you also farm at a slower rate, meaning that a good rate of farm in Dota might be 600 or 700 gold per minute, meaning that the item will take you somewhere along the lines of like 6 or 7 minutes to farm rather than 4 minutes. So it'll take you longer to get the item, and it only gives you 25% cooldown as opposed to the 32% that improved cooldown gives you for one ability. Of course, it gives you 24% for all the other abilities as well. So that's just one example, and then you've got a bunch of other items. For example, Spiritual Overflow that gives you 15% cooldown reduction, and then you've got Diviner Scalp that gives you 12% cooldown reduction. You have Leech that gives you 12% cooldown reduction. You've got the recharge items that gives you cooldown reduction on charged abilities, right? And the cooldown reduction is very significant. So rapid recharge, as you can see here, gives 30% cooldown reduction for charged abilities. Now, if you stack that on top of just having cooldown and from a bunch of different items, you can quickly see that the cooldown reduction can get ridiculous, especially if you're late into the game and you've grabbed a bunch of golden statue buffs and you've got another, 10 to 15% cooldown reduction from those. And then on top of that, you have a bridge buff, etc. It's not that hard in this game to get to 50% cooldown reduction. And the reason why that's a problem, and we've seen this, I think, more recently, especially with the rise of Dynamo recently, at least in North America, is because it feels like heroes have their ultimates up every single fight. So if we talk about that a little bit, you guys have probably run into Dynamo in your pubs, and it just feels like he always has Singularity, and the ultimate is obviously really strong, but the logic behind such ultimates usually in other MOBAs like Dota is like, hey, it's got a super long cooldown, so hey, yeah, he uses it, yeah, it's really strong, but if you have a lineup that has more tempo and a lineup that's able to be more brawly and take more fights, then you'll be able to punish that ultimate while it's on cooldown, right? However, that doesn't really seem to be the case, because for Dynamo it's pretty easy for his ult to become like a 90-second cooldown, right? It doesn't take that much cooldown reduction to get there. Like 95 seconds is very easily achievable, and if you get to 95 seconds, then at that point what happens is people can't punish it. And the reason they can't punish it is 95 seconds might seem like a long time, but let's say you use your ultimate and you win a fight with it because it's so strong, right? Once you've won that fight, the people might be dead for 30, 40 seconds, depending on when in the game it is, right? Let's say it's at 20 minutes, people are probably dead for 40 seconds or so, right? If they're dead for 40 seconds, that means that effectively the window that they have to punish it is roughly, you know, 50 to 60 seconds, which is a very short time to punish it. It gives you less than a minute to take a fight on the map before Dynamo has a singularity. So by the time that you get out of spawn, get in position, you might have 30, 40 seconds left before you can take a fight. So you might be able to get a punish in, but it's pretty hard, generally speaking, to get a punish on those abilities. I think Pocket is another great example of that, where he just kind of like uses his ultimate. If we look at Pocket here, his ultimate without any cooldown reduction or anything is 127 seconds, which is a pretty long time, and you know, it's 2 minutes. But then you have minus 28 second cooldown on your first talent, which brings it out to 100 seconds. And then the moment that you start getting some cooldown reduction, like let's say you go superior cooldown and you go Diviner's Kevlar, then at that point your ultimate is going to be more like a 60-second cooldown, and your ultimate is up every single fight, right? You don't even need to think about how to use your ultimate, right? Like there's no thought required behind your ability usage. You just pretty much throw your ability out every single time there's a fight. You don't need to worry about it being good. It can be a one-man ult. It doesn't even matter because it's going to be up next fight again, right? Like the risk to reward ratio of ultimates in general, because of all the cooldown reduction present in the game, is just extremely skewed. And the same can be said for abilities in general, right? For example, if you look at Pocket, you look at a Satchel, the base cooldown is like 17 seconds, which 17 seconds is long enough to punish, right? Like you use this Satchel once, okay, there's a cost to that, and you can probably punish him and maybe catch him with some CC or some silence or something like that. But now he gets his talent, which gives him minus 4.75 seconds, his upgrade, sorry. And now he's at 12 seconds, and then he'll get some cooldown reduction. And all of a sudden, late game, the Satchel can very easily be an 8-second cooldown. An 8-second cooldown is pretty hard to punish, especially considering the fact that Satchel itself will last like, you know, 2 seconds or something, right? So you've got maybe a 6-second to punish. So it's just a very, very short window of time, and it allows a lot of characters to get away with stuff that I feel like should not necessarily be encouraged in a MOBA, where I feel like generally you should have to think about the way that you use your abilities. One of the more extreme examples that I had seen recently was I played against a Wraith whose cooldown on her ultimate got down to 35 seconds. At 35 seconds, you can literally use your ultimate twice in a fight, and at that point I think it's just starting to get a little bit ridiculous. So I think that this situation needs to be addressed, and I want to talk about you guys about what I think should be done and kind of hear what you guys' opinion on the subject is. So now that we've explained the problem a little bit, if you want to TLDR the problem, it's essentially that I think that cooldown reduction is one, way too easy to obtain, and two, that cooldowns on abilities, especially ultimates, tend to be a little bit too short in the first place, meaning that you don't really need to think much about when you use them, which I think takes away a little bit of the MOBA element from the game and just makes it into a little bit more of a spam fest, which I personally don't love about the game at the moment. Now, I still love Deadlock, don't get me wrong. This is all constructive criticism, right? And I have some suggestions, sorry about that, about what I think should be done to improve, and I want you guys' input and see if you guys have different suggestions from me. So the first thing that I would do is I think a lot of ultimates need cooldown adjustments. Pocket and Dynamo, of course, are some of the ones that come to mind, but I think that a lot of characters could be looked at and be like, hey, is this ultimate really long enough of a cooldown? Do we want to give cooldown reduction on ultimates as readily as we do, right? Like almost every single cooldown in the game, if you look, Infernus ultimate, the first upgrade is minus cooldown. If you look Wraith ultimate, first upgrade minus cooldown. You look Bebop ultimate, first upgrade minus cooldown. Pocket ultimate, first upgrade minus cooldown. Like, I'm not gonna keep going, right? But Abrams also, Geist also, like every single ultimate in the game has a huge minus cooldown upgrade. Should that really be the case? Is that where we want to go with the direction of ultimates in this game? I personally am not so sure. I think that it doesn't feel as interesting if every ultimate just has minus cooldown for free if you just spend 1 AP on them. I personally would much prefer that we go with, hey, ultimates should be very strong and should feel very impactful, but on the other hand, they should feel like there's an opportunity if you miss your ultimate or if you don't use it at a good time, and then now you have like 2-3 minutes where you're not as impactful in fights, and you know your team needs to worry a little bit about that and add another layer to the macro gameplay of this game. So that's the first thing they should do. I think that these upgrades where you can get like just a free, just a bunch of minus cooldown for free. You know, I'm down for maybe minus cooldown on the last upgrade of AP, right? Like if you invest everything into your ultimate, then maybe it's okay if it has minus cooldown. Like for example, Warden, minus 56-second cooldown on max level. Maybe that's okay. But I think that these minus 38 seconds, minus 40 seconds on first level, I personally don't like that very much, right? Like same for Paradox, minus 15-second cooldown, etc. The second thing that I would do is I would drastically reduce the amount of sources of cooldown reduction. So right now, like I said earlier, you can get them from bridge buffs, you can get them from golden statues, you can get them from a bunch of different items. So I would remove cooldown reduction from golden statues altogether, right? I would look at something else that's a little bit more interesting, or maybe just remove it from the pool altogether and don't replace it, and just keep health and spirit in there. I believe there's also ammo, so maybe if you keep health, spirit, and ammo in there, it's fine. But I think cooldown reduction should not be obtainable from golden statues, especially now that sinner sacrifices give you some golden statue buffs as well as the urn. The second thing is I would reduce the amount of items that give cooldown reduction extremely significantly. So for example, an item like rapid recharge, in my opinion, should not really give cooldown reduction, right? Like the idea of the item rapid recharge for me is like, hey, you're going to be able to use your charges faster, 60% faster time between charges, and you're going to get more charges. I don't really think that it should give you like less cooldown for your charged abilities as well, and I think that this allows for a ton of spam, and I would much prefer that it makes your charged abilities more impactful. So let's say that it gives you extra spirit for those charged abilities. I think that would be fine. I don't want to nerf the overall power of the item because I don't think rapid recharge is an OP OP item per se, but I don't think that it should have cooldown reduction. I would much prefer it have something like just flat spirit added to your abilities with charges, kind of similar to a surge of power but for charged abilities. Now I think that a bunch of other items also need to be looked at similarly. For example, I know that we buffed barriers quite a while ago with Enchanter's Barrier getting cooldown reduction. I really do not think Enchanter's Barrier should give cooldown reduction. I think that, for example, that's just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And if you type cooldown reduction in the shop, you'll see that a lot of these sources to me don't really make a lot of sense. I don't think Spiritual Overflow should have cooldown reduction. I don't think Leech should have cooldown reduction, and I don't think Diviner's Kevlar should have it. I think there should be one item that gives cooldown reduction, which is superior cooldown, and you can choose one ability to imbue, and that's it. And on the abilities you don't have imbued, you get 24% cooldown reduction, which is already pretty significant, right? If your cooldown's 100 seconds, you're saving off 24 seconds, which I think is already a lot of cooldown reduction. And I don't really think that we need to have all this cooldown reduction in the game. I don't think it's necessarily healthy for the game like long term, and I don't think it makes the game more fun to play or more interesting. The only thing that it enables are builds that are solely focused around ultimate abilities that can spam them more frequently, but other than that, I just don't think that it's necessarily more fun, and a lot of the time it just feels pretty unfun to play against heroes that have their ultimate abilities up literally all the time. I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm mostly curious what you guys think about the topic. Am I crazy for having this opinion? Do you guys think that they should reduce cooldown reduction overall? Do you guys think that it's actually totally fine and I'm just like overreacting maybe? Once again, I want to say this is all criticism. I still love the game, and don't get angry in the comments or whatever. But yeah, just curious to hear your opinion. As always, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.